Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer. Ich begrüße
Welcome,
Sie.
ladies and gentlemen. I would like to wish you a very warm welcome here at Axica Convention Center in Berlin, just right next to the Brandenburg Gate. We can see the quadriga over there and also the German Parliament, the Reichstag, and we've spent 1.5 exciting and interesting days. We talked about the EU agenda with the motto de-risking and decarbonization or decarbonizing, and there are specific elements and very interesting inputs that we've received, and we've learned a lot. So it's a complicated agenda at European level, and it's not uncontested, of course. So it is a huge challenge, and it's also contested, and questions are raised like decarbonization, decarbonizing, de-risking. How will you realize all that, and how can it be realized in a socially way, and how can it be accepted socially? And a second point we've discussed is the question, how can we get there? So what is the way we have to pursue? How can we implement this kind of agenda, this joint agenda of decarbonization and de-risking? And who's the engine, the motor behind it? Especially when we have a look at the Franco-German relationship or couple. But at the same time, it was quite clear that the Franco-German engine is lagging a bit behind maybe. So we have the feeling that, of course, we have a joint basis, but still it's not really working perfectly fine. So how can we get there? This is the big question we would like to raise. So in 2024, the big event that will happen are the European elections in June 2022, 24, and this is our hot topic, and we will discuss this topic today. We have a fantastic panel here, and I'm very happy to welcome great experts, excellent experts. So on my right side, we have Pascal Thibaut. Since 1990, he has been working and living in Berlin, and since 1997, he is the international journalist and editor of Radio France Internationale, and he knows Germany very well. He is Franco-German, and he is, well, an expert in this field, and he will speak German. And Cécile, she could also speak German. So she's the economics correspondent in Germany of Le Monde. And you've also been a parliamentary assistant in the European Council. And I think you've worked for Radio Vaticana, really interesting, but you're most and foremost a big connoisseur of the German economic situation, German economy. And you are also translating the important discussions in terms of economics, and you transfer those debates, those German debates, into the French public. Then we have Georgina Wright. She works at the Institut Montaigne in Paris. She worked at the NATO, at the European Commission, and yeah, this is what she did. And especially the German-British relationships are interesting. And you will also speak French. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that it works with the translation so that we can just, well, jump in and start. So one of the big challenges to face, and this has also been part of our discussions during the Pariser Platz Dialogue. So what will be the hot topic when it comes to the European election? So European topics or national topics? So what would be the point of view, or let's say the focus of France and Germany? What are the expectations? What do we have to expect when it comes to campaigning at European level? And maybe we start with you, Pascal. What is your impression? What is the national mood in Germany, and starting the election year, European election year next year? Is it about Scholz and his work or European topics? So, I mean, we still have 8 months to go. And I think today I would say the following. So people are not really satisfied when it comes to the government. And I think this will be mirrored or echoed in the elections. So there are also national elections in Eastern Germany, for example, so local elections. And as you might know, the Alternative for Germany won a lot of seats. And I think maybe winter and spring will bring about changes. We don't know. Maybe the Germans will remain in their, let's say, dark tunnel, but maybe changes will come up. But it might be the case that the German government, will be punished by the voters because the European topics seem to be, not as prominent as they could be due to the German debate. So what is your impression? This is also what we've heard during our discussions. So the government is in a deep crisis. It's not a debt crisis, it's a debt break crisis here in Germany because this is the focus of the German policy. What about the topics? What do you think? What are the perspectives and the prospects for the time before the elections? So there is one topic which is really interesting, and I can see that this has been on the agenda for months, and it becomes more and more important. It's maybe a very German topic, but it's also an European one, like for example, the combustion engines. And I think the end of the combustion engines until 2030 is really something that leads to a lot of frustration also in Eastern Germany, in East Germany, and in the western part. We see that there are regions that have been well organized, also in terms of the unions, and this they are well organized, especially the working committees in German companies. And I've always thought that the Western part is protected by the unions and the great organization, and that the far right would not be on a rise in this part of Germany. But now we are in the following situation. Decarbonization is a very important topic. It's something that is driven by and accelerated by the European Union. And I mean, young people love that topic. They really think it's a good idea, but their majority or many people in the population have a relationship to the industry and the different industries, and they have the feeling that are losing something. And I've seen in my work and during my work that within Germany, there are many people who have the feeling that they are the losers of this transformation, of this transition. And this is something that is tangible. You can feel that. So these are European topics, but they have an immense and big impact on their personal life. And this is really this narrative, the German narrative is lacking this aspect. And when we talk about this narrative, I mean, politicians talk about this topic, the government deals with this topic, but this, let's say, competence of the government of conveying the message that there will be a good future and people won't be losers. Yes, thank you. So it is also about European questions and the question of stopping the production of combustion engines is also an idea that has been promoted by Ursula von der Leyen as the president of the European Commission. So do you think that this will be scrutinized, this let's say the strategy, because the question is always, what about the strategy? Yes, it's all about the consequences, because in this case, and we have something very strong. There is a trend, a tendency that this responsibility will or has to be assumed and taken at European level. But when it comes to the Social Democratic Party here in Germany, SPD, it's up to them to act. And on the IG matter Congress, the Unions Congress, it was a big topic. The question is how to keep the people on the right side. I mean, the AfD, Alternative for Germany, is a right-wing party. It's an extreme right party, but still, people they fear the transformation, the transition, and we live in a world that is very unsteady, and people have many fears. And when you don't have a perspective, and I mean, Germany is getting older and older, then it's really complicated to see a positive future and to assume to predict a positive future. And if you don't have when people don't have the possibility to adjust, to adapt, then yeah, there are big questions. But when I think of the combustion engine of artificial intelligence, and this is the next big shift, the next big change, disruption that will happen, and people are worried. People fear this transition, and it's the first time that I see that engineers receiving good wages, having a good life, that they question the climate change. Or Jens Spahn, for example, he said the following also yesterday during our discussion, and that was really interesting. And he said that when it comes regarding the combustion engine, we've already made a lot of steps towards or compared to the Chinese, and people always said we are lagging behind when it comes to electric motors, and we did them a favor. So of course, Germany can construct or produce electric vehicles, but the point is that the message conveyed was that Germany could not put up with the Chinese. So what about the national topics? What are the national topics that we can expect? So generally, we speak that there will be a referendum on Macron. So what is your expectation? What do you think? Are there rather national topics on the agenda in France, or what do you
Merci beaucoup,
think?
Jacques Delors, pour l'invitation et merci aux interprètes parce que
So
sans
first
eux,
of all,
je
thank you
n'aurais
very
pas pu répondre
much
à ta question.
for the
Donc, merci beaucoup.
invitation, and thank you very
Merci
much for the interpreters, because I could not have understood the question without the interpreters. So thank you very much.
Mais la
I
campagne se
think that
dessine,
the EU
notamment au
elections
Rassemblement
have not
national,
really
des
been
changements
in the center of interest
de mandat
of the civil
d'environnement
society.
politique
So I
pour les
think the
élections.
campaigning is
On a
about to
également
start. The
l'élection
Rassemblement
qui fait son
National
plein très
has
pleinement selon
already
votre président. Donc
presented
il y a une
their
mobilisation, mais pour l'instant elle est assez
their
faible.
candidate, and also the
Voilà.
Renaissance group supporting Macron has introduced a candidate, but there was not much interest in that. What I've seen in the last few days is that there is a distinct contrast between what is important for the European Commission, and of course they will play an important role. I refer to security and safety of the European Union, the war in Ukraine, enlargement questions. How can the EU function with 35 member states, for example, so with new member states? And of course, the question of competitiveness is key. And this is a topic that is of utmost importance, that is discussed in France, in German. And we know that China is a huge competitor. And how can we assure and guarantee the competitiveness of the European Union? And when we have a look at the polls, for example, then we see that the voters deal with other topics. Migration it is, for example. And I think this will become even more important in the upcoming years. The costs of the energy transition, energy bills, and I agree with you. This is a topic that is constantly discussed, and also the question of responsibilities. Has the European Union the responsibility and also the right to change their agenda, and can they implement their agenda? And I think the citizens have a feeling of losing control, that they don't have much control. And the question is, what will be the European Union's role, and how can the EU support the citizens in facing all these challenges? In France, since there will be big elections coming up in 2027. So the European elections will represent a referendum for Macron. He is a pro-European. With the speech at the Sorbonne, he introduced a lot of reforms, and some of them have been realized. And the question now, or implemented, the question now is, what can we do in order to come forward and to move forward? I think in France there are more extremist parties that might be elected into the European Parliament. And one last point I would like to make, and I think the Rassemblement National, the National Rally, they want less power for the European Union, but for the others, the Socialist Party and so on, it's quite difficult to convey their message because they've just started their campaigns and they can test different slogans and mottos, but I think it won't be an easy election to win, and I think the voters are not really interested in this.
So we have touched upon many of the European topics. To what extent is it possible for there to be a European debate? And given the situation in Germany, we have the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union. It is not entirely clear yet, but Ursula von der Leyen might be their candidate. You also mentioned Jens Spahn. And so in the European Parliament and in Germany, there are critical voices about the Green Deal. How is the debate going to unfold? And concerning combustion engines, what are the parties that might be defending another point of view? So if we look at this type of debate on a European level, what could the debate around candidates look like? As mentioned previously, the different topics that are on people's minds in France and in Germany are quite similar. And all these problems and most solutions depend on Europe or will be decided by Europe, such as combustion engines. And the challenge should be for politicians and their teams running the campaigns next year will be that one should underline how the importance of Europe and how all the topics that are important are also connected to Europe. So European policies, also domestic policies to an extent. Otherwise, I think there's a real risk that we have a campaign for the European elections which are disconnected so that people won't feel concerned because it will feel like technocratic topics to them, topics that they feel aren't really their business. So I think the campaigns should be about that, about the fact that everything happening within the parliament or the commission has an impact on people's lives and politics. I'm not involved, but I think the fight against COVID was a good example of the impact of Europe and this procurement of jabs, for instance, against COVID, and talking as well of the German budget and the crisis Germany is facing at the moment that needs to be tackled. And we have the debt break and then the decision of the Constitutional Court. They're both playing into it. We have already mentioned the IRA, the big program in the USA. we need to make sure that people understand that if Europe has fewer means, that has an impact, and that Europe has a responsibility for people's everyday problems, but that we also need to make sure there's a future for Europe, and that's not easy. I think it is about a pedagogical approach, trying to reach citizens and really explaining very clearly that it has an impact on each and every person. And I think that's often the challenge with European topics. We and others are part of a bubble that might be disconnected from many voters. But it is also part of the problem that it will put us in a situation where first we have to explain why Europe is relevant, and then we want to debate different solutions. And what Katharina Bale mentioned this morning also is that there's a risk that people, if they really want to have an option, they might feel like they have to be either pro-European or against Europe. And so that we spend so much time explaining what Europe is so that we end up not having enough space for the actual debates about what Europe can be. And maybe this is a question for you, Cécile. This very concrete question, by 2030, do we need to have banned all combustion engines, or should it be by 2050? Because we don't want to be dependent on Chinese electric cars. So what shape can this debate take within the European elections?
Je ne sais pas si on aura le temps de faire beaucoup de pédagogie, malheureusement, parce qu'on est dans une
I'm
situation de
not
crise.
sure if we have so much time left for a pedagogical approach. We are currently in a situation of crisis, and that makes it very difficult to have a didactic approach. Actually, it is about building trust and giving the impression that people have control. It is about offering a promise that citizens can identify with, a promise that might soothe them, a promise that it doesn't involve a form of withdrawal. We can see the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, is alluding to the 80s and the 90s. They have understood that people need to be reassured. And I think one point is very interesting, namely industrial policy. How can this be turned into an advantage? We can observe currently that in the United States, Biden has voted the Inflation Reduction Act in order to be in control so that the United States can produce themselves. And I think that's a very concrete topic, and it's also relevant to Europe, and people are working on it. Some speakers said that currently we're facing with a European moment, and this might lead to more cohesion. We need to be able to act together, hand in hand. The enemy is not amongst us, and this, the enemy or the challenge, is actually outside. There are exterior challenges outside of Europe, and the time has come where we need to be able to find solutions and this constructive momentum. And it was mentioned in the debate with Jens Spahn and with other speakers. Macron's ambitions were also mentioned. I'm not sure how fruitful it was, but there is a real momentum for reindustrialization, taking everybody along, more motivation, therefore, and there's a will to conquer, to do something for oneself, to strengthen oneself, and that's working. And it also shows that Europe is able to do that. I think there's a real need for safety, security, and there are many topics. We can't convince voters that Europe is a good thing or a bad thing. We have reached a turning point in European history, and we need to make sure Europe can protect us and there's more sovereignty. And these topics are topics that different parties and voters can come together around. And within the CDU, that would be important too, because otherwise the right-wing parties will make these their own. What do you think this how are they going to address this very specific problem? So there's a very successful president of the commission, but she'll be running for something that isn't necessarily supported by all CDU members. That's a very specific question. I think that's very unusual. These populist tendencies, we try to give people what they want to hear, and actually everything's already been prepared. People spend a long time preparing for the many technologies being worked on. And that's also true of artificial intelligence. It is not too late yet. If we took a different approach, 2035, that's almost tomorrow. But it already started, and I think it would be counterproductive if we now took a different path. We need to make sure we soothe people, reassure them, and the Socialist Party, the SPD, can do so. Maybe does there need to be a break? Many people argue that there should be a break in regulations. That's been broadly discussed already. Should there be a break when it comes to the industry? If we say we're actually jeopardizing what our achievements, so not a green break, it's not a break in terms of our ambitions, but maybe we could take into account that transformation is taking more time than anticipated, because it is actually about something people need to be explained. The industry is already in the process of going down that path. One of the questions was about how does the left react, especially concerning the criticism voiced about the green transition. So the question would be how, for workers and the industry, how can we have a social dimension to that green topic, and then maybe we would have the left and the Socialist Party, which would get more involved. What's interesting is there's a new approach and a new movement within the left spectrum in Germany. So on the left of the left. And if we have a look at their videos, it is mainly about energy and certain areas. So it is really using this, taking this opportunity, trying to soothe people, saying the industry used to be our identity, it was made our wealth, and therefore actually feeding the fear of change. But actually, change is something interesting and positive. And of course, that is also a counter argument that technically we are able to react. And concerning the left, there is a shift. There is this problem, and Sarah Wagenknecht really understood that fear. And the left, the traditional left, as a party, has been focusing on green topics, on LGBTQI topics, and now the question is about the voters and the population, the people I met in the companies. To them, they're urban topics, very far removed from their own reality in their day-to-day lives. And I think that should also be taken into account. And we should also need to take into account that it will create polarization.
Right. Thank you very much. Maybe we can come back to the chat, because there have been questions posted regarding the populist voices and populism. So what do you think? How strong is from the right, the extreme right-wing parties or side? What about the debates? What about the topics in France that are shed light on or that are in the center of interest? Well, to be honest, the extreme right-wing parties and left-wing parties do not talk about Europe or on rare occasions. And we've heard Marine Le Pen, and it's all about Brexit and Frexit, and that France wants to leave the Eurozone, for example. And of course, and some say we have to keep the euro, but the European Union and Europe needs to be reformed. But what we know is that often people say, well, the Commission is a bubble in Brussels, does too much, has too much influence and impact on everything. But nevertheless, there is no concrete idea regarding the transformation of the European Union. And there is a lot of talking going on regarding the energy policy. And we've talked about that during the last 2 days. There is no single or unique, or let's say joint energy policy, and there are different energy policies. And we've seen that during the campaigning and elections in France. Marine Le Pen, she said, no, we won't finance and subsidize the energy for Germany. And there is no real structured or really structured agenda. And I think that we have a lot of work to do. Renaissance, for example, so the president needs to work a lot. He has to do more. And of course, one could say President Macron did a lot of things, he changed a lot of things, he moved a lot of things, but still the European debate has not been, well, it's really influenced by France. It has never been influenced that much. You talk about the single market, but also about the single market that needs to be protected, that we have to protect our own interests. And this is a topic that is on the agenda thanks to France, and Germany and France are working hand in hand, even though it's not easy at all. But we have to continue. We have to pursue our way. We can't make a break. There are a lot of people that they worry. They have a lot of worries, and we have to take them seriously. And I think this is what people expect from us. This is the parties of the center expecting, also when it comes to the Socialist Party and other parties. It's all about climate transformation and climate transition. And in the last years, we've heard a lot about the CBAM, for example, CO2 taxation. What about this tax, and who benefits from this tax or this levy? And I think this is a narrative we have to come back to, and this needs to be on the agenda. And I think the society can benefit from this topic. And furthermore, I think that it's really interesting when we to think about the European agenda. It's a very specific and important moment for for the European Union. And one participant said sometimes you compare these moments with the 1990s, talk about institutional topics. Maybe the Commission is too big, but I think we should think like we did in the 1950s. It's about important public political spaces. The European Union, we talk about competitiveness with China, the EU enlargement, we talk about geopolitics, and I think this is a paradigm shift. We have to accompany and support the society because this is something we can't just discuss in the bubble in Brussels. And we have to transfer those topics into the society. Thank you very much. That was really put very well. And I think what we have to do is to to answer these big questions and to inject them, to bring them into the campaigns. And it's not about education or didactics. It's about the people understanding the challenges, the current challenges they have to face and Europe has to face. And I think maybe, Cécile, you wanted to come back to that, right? Yes, I would like to come back to what Georgina just said. And there's also a question regarding this spending freeze in Germany at the moment. I think it's a German problem, and it's marked by a problem we all have to face in Europe. So Germany pursued a transformative industrial policy, climate policy, and defense policy. And at the same time, the budget has been detoured, kind of. And this special budget, we have the budget and the special budget. And I think this needs to be part of the democratic debate, and their geopolitical ideas and sovereignty is key. And France made its point, but nevertheless, there are no majorities in this debate. And what we have to do is to anchor, to integrate these topics into the constitution, into the debate. And I think we have the why isn't it working in Germany? And we're kind of blocked in Germany and in Europe because we share the same problems. And when we have this educational debate regarding the Commission and the Council and how many members should be represented, and what about the roles played by the different commissioners, etc. I'm afraid that this will be a big problem, and you can't really concentrate on. We should not concentrate on the single problems. We should concentrate on the question: who do we want to be for the world, in the world? And I think this is a debate that has not really that wasn't done, let's say, discussed in Germany. And this is a problem. So I think we should seize the opportunity and talk about this topic and say, yes, we have to do it now. We have to implement it now. This will be more efficient, and we have to be offensive and not defensive, also regarding the extreme right parties. And we have a lot to say. And I think this is really an interesting topic we could share and convey a message. And so there is another question, but regarding the budget questions, of course, the budget is a sacred idea, or let's say the sacred part of every parliament, and local parliaments and the federal parliament. But what we see is when it comes to energy policies, and the EU hasn't had a share when it came to energy policy. But now Germany has the problem with the spending freeze you've just described. But I think there shouldn't be unanimity at a European level when it comes to this, because we have the Maastricht Treaty. But the question is, how can we finance, how can we fund future investments? What about the industry we want to have be implanted and anchored here in Germany? And when we talk about big investments, well, sometimes plans do not work. But still, it creates works in Magdeburg, like factories that are built there. But it's all about European sovereignty and how to, let's say, reform the sovereignty. And I think it should now, Berlin is making the decisions, but this should not be decided at Berlin, in Berlin. But let's come back to you three. So you are on the same page. You agree on the European topics, on the challenges you are facing and the European Union is facing. But when it comes to populism, and I would like to come back to this point, from a populist side, other topics are on the agenda, such as migration. And this is also a question in the chat. What about migration in Germany and in France, and also on the background of the elections in Netherlands and the winner of the elections there? So what about, do you think that the populism of this topic of populism will impact and dominate the European elections? And another point I would like to make, and another question I would like to raise, what about the EU enlargement? How will this topic play an important role in the campaigning? Because here in Germany, this is a topic that is discussed. But what about France? Because in Germany, we say we need to assure EU enlargement due to security concerns. And is that the same situation in France? Or do you think that people would be against an enlargement? So two important topics. So what is your opinion? So everywhere, in every country in the European Union, the right-wing populists will try to use this topic for their own interests. And this is their raison d'être, so to speak. But it's not always a topic that is a high priority on the list of the population, but we've talked about the different topics people are afraid of, but the situation is more complex, so to speak, when we talk about different needs in Germany, for example. So on one side, in France, the topic of skilled labor. This is not only a topic in Germany, but also in France, and people do not really accept, or the question is, do people accept people with a migrational background more, yes or no? And I mean, of course, in Germany, there is a more restrictive migrational policy, and the German government tries to change the situation. And this is also a European topic. I don't know whether this will contribute to in order to weaken the right-wing parties. I think it will play an important role. And when it comes to EU enlargement, so those who are in favor should, well, do something about it, to be honest. It's a topic that is of utmost importance, and you should not hide this topic from the voters. Of course, people are afraid, but some populists will most certainly make use of this topic, like you're selling the German citizenship, and you're kind of selling you so very cheap EU membership, and this could be, let's say, an argument made by the populists. This could become part of the public debate. So, Cécile, what do you think? So regarding the topic of migration, I think we need to make a sharp distinction, because in France, it's about the second generation, it's about racism, about people who are already there, struggling with migrational problems, let's say problems of identity, problems of finding a job. And in Germany, the situation is different compared to France. In Germany, the right-wing parties, they are on a rise with the arrival of migrants, or people who are considered being migrants. And without being racist, I mean, there is a problem. And this is what the mayors say we have to use the gyms for. for the refugees, and the children can't do gymnastics or do sports. We have to build new houses for them and buildings, and we have to finance that. And at a local level, this is quite difficult. So reasonable people talking about those problems. I mean, of course, you can't deny these problems, but still the political sphere in Germany has reacted too late. And they did not really make a good distinction between the lack of skilled labor and the invitation of more migrants to come to Germany. And of course, there is illegal migration and not a justified migration, maybe. So people whose lives are not endangered or jeopardized and who can work. But I think that this political strategy led to the right-wing parties, to the extremists, like Ms. Barley said, that the extremists jumped on this train, because we will lose these people, and this will be a huge problem. And if you ask me, it is important to discuss differently about this topic. Of course, we have our own limits and borders and restrictions, but when it comes to limits and borders, and they're kind of opaque. So we have concrete limits. This is a very specific topic, a very old topic, because France in the past was not in favor of the EU enlargement, but still we have to talk about different limits, different restrictions and borders in order to calm down, to soothe the European societies or population. And this is a topic we have to talk about. It's a topic everybody is interested in, and it's crystal clear that all the parties who are not from the far right have to adopt this topic without polarizing. We have to be able to say it's not easy. It's not easy for those arriving here in Germany, and it's not easy for those receiving those people. If you can't use playgrounds anymore, of course, this is a problem. It is about the stability of social structures, and this is a topic we can't just solve by using funding. We need concrete measures.
Do you want to react to this question about migration and what was just said, and about France? Very quickly, because I think everything was said. We shouldn't leave this terrain to the far right, and we observed this in the Dutch elections. We knew it was going to happen, and the center-right parties really tackled the topic later than the other parties. And it is important to say this is a topic we're also going to discuss, but we know the far right doesn't have the solution. Concerning enlargement, I don't think it is going to be the main topic for the campaign, but I think we need to accompany our societies. The European Treaty defines that there needs to be a national election on this. So the parliament gives its opinion, but also national parliaments. And so that's a referendum. So we need to explain what the benefits would be for Europe. And we're very far away from this, because other topics will be the priority. But so I think it will be a topic. The topic of enlargement, as you said, we need to also make it clear why it is important that there's a security aspect, and also what needs to happen within the EU in terms of reforms for the EU to be ready for the adhesion of new countries. That's also an important political aspect. We have a whole series of questions here, and I'd like to thank you for your many questions. We won't be able to address each and every one of the questions. We tried to to integrate some of them into our answers. We have a whole series of questions around the topic of democracy. We don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the different responsibilities, but what I can hear here in your questions is that many things here are being defined as European problems or challenges requiring European answers. But is there enough democratic legitimacy for European solution? So that brings me to the next question, the idea of the Spitzenkandidat, the top candidate. That's a topic widely discussed in Germany. Isn't there a risk that we might disappoint? In 2015, Juncker was the Spitzenkandidat of the EPP and was then president of the Commission, and there was a lot of pressure saying, no, that's not possible. You told us he would get that mandate if he had the most votes. And then Ursula von der Leyen moved away from that principle as president. So the idea of the Spitzenkandidat, do you think that's going to be a main element of the elections? And will the European elections suffice to give the Commission democratic legitimacy so that it can really tackle European challenges? I know it's a very complex question, but I think there's a whole series of questions around supranational democracy, and we need to address those. Maybe we'll start with you, Georgina, and then Cécile and Pascal. I'm not entirely sure that this is the right answer to create more enthusiasm. I think what we really need is pre-elections debates. Currently, what we have is 27 national elections. Of course, some of them will focus more on Europe, but I think we're very far away from people saying, oh, I will vote for this party because they do that on a European level. And so maybe it is an institutional and easy answer I am giving, but if it's an election, why shouldn't we see it more as a national election? In the United States, there are pre-elections, etc. And I think maybe we need to have a better understanding of the position of the different parties, and what we observe is that the parties themselves are divided upon certain topics, and so that makes it much more difficult to have a very clear position on certain topics. But that makes also that also makes the charm of European elections, and you need to be interested in it, have the time to follow what's going on, but I don't think it'll happen by itself. And then real politics is going to determine who will be the president of the Commission. The Council, based on the results of the elections, will try to take it into account, but actually it will be a situation where people will have to tie a parcel with the different positions and the president of the Commission. What's your take on this, Cécile? So I think there will be a move towards conservative parties, and that we will focus more on states. I can't imagine more European enthusiasm or federal enthusiasm. I think it was already tricky in the past, and to be realistic here, I can't see this logic taking up more space in the future. And that's why we need to make sure that member states reach a type of consensus when it comes to a common vision of Europe. That would be good. Also, having lesser known candidates that might be seem a bit distant. It's difficult to make them more known and to establish them more. I don't see that happening. It would be taking a significant amount of risk trying to introduce a new dimension to these elections. It's a shame, but really we are facing a whole array of crises. I'm not sure we're ready to take more risks, embrace uncertainty when it comes to these elections. I'm not sure about that. I think as long as the European Union doesn't work exactly like a parliamentarian democracy, as it is the case within national states, where we elect a parliament and then the parliament takes decisions, it will always remain very difficult to really strengthen a democratic legitimacy. And we might have these Spitzenkandidaten somewhere behind stage negotiating around corridors, and then they nominate somebody who, like a bunny, jumps out of a hat. I think in order to anchor trust and faith in Europe, we need to act differently. If we need European lists in all 27 member states, maybe that could be taking a step forward if at least in every country we had lists with the same name. So matching the groups in the European Parliament, but as was just mentioned, even within these groups, there are significant differences in terms of positions. And so I'm not entirely sure this could really work because the approach in terms of how things are organized is still too focused on the national level. But what we should avoid, definitely, and that happened last time, is that citizens are introduced to a Spitzenkandidat and then somebody else gets the mandate. So I think we need to actually interview people. Did it really traumatize European citizens? Maybe they didn't mind at all or didn't care, but maybe we need to have more distance towards our own bubble there. Coming back to one of the questions raised in the chat, so you think we need a mix of realpolitik, but also because we'll probably have quite a fragmented parliament, we also need a kind of basis consensus concerning a common denominator in the center. So a bit like a great coalition between the three main parties at a European level and amongst the different candidates. That's what I'm hearing here, that we'll have a mix, a parcel, as I said earlier, where we'll try to reach a consensus concerning who might be the right people. I can see you all three nodding. I think slowly we're running out of time. I would like to thank all of you for your contributions. I really hope that what you said will also will be something we can come back to, because the piece of advice you all gave to a certain extent was that what we need to manage is to have European topics for these European elections. And the only way to achieve that is to make it clear to our citizens why European elections matter. They need to tackle actual people's problems. And the reason there's been criticism around current politics, and that's something you mentioned with the Green Deal and how socially compatible it would be, or concerning migration, and then really underlining how what the room for maneuvers on a European level. Thank you very much for being open to discussing this with me. Thank you to the audience. I'm afraid we weren't able to answer all of your questions, but I hope we were able to give you an overview of all the topics we think will come up during the European elections. Thank you very much and have a great weekend. Bye.